Welcome to Direction Northeast. Hello, I'm Kit Alexander. This program is a presentation of the Communications Department at Northeast State Community College. We hear about them every day. They're on the battlefield, in the grocery store, and soon they'll be delivering goods to your door. Today we learn what we wanted to know about drones. We'll meet our guest and start our discussion following these messages. With new technologies literally buzzing around us, everyone is talking about drones. They will change the way that goods are bought and distributed. They will change how police manage crime or rescue teams and save lives. With us today to discuss drones is a familiar face from local TV, WCYB, the weatherman, Ricky Mathews.
Hey.
Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I would like to start out with this from the get-go. Sinclair has a pretty big drone program in place. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so WCYB, we are owned by Sinclair Broadcast Group, one of the biggest television companies in the United States right now. We've got stations from West Coast to East Coast. And a couple years ago, they launched a drone program because it used to be you would use helicopters to go up and get aerial footage, but helicopters are really, really expensive. And a lot of stations just aren't using helicopters anymore because of the costs associated with them. But the drone market has really taken off probably in the last 5 to 10 years, and I think really in the last probably 5 years for the news industry. And so Sinclair launched a drone program that uses, first we started using the Inspire 1, now we're on to the Inspire 2s and the Mavic Pros. And we can get into kind of the difference between those later, but basically it allows us to go out and get different shots, different styles of shots that we couldn't get without a plane or a helicopter back in the day. And I just think it's really changed the way we show things on television, on social media, and gives our viewers a really unique perspective that they can't get otherwise.
So tell us about like the role there, in particular WCYB, with like the weather and stuff. How does that play a role, like in just a typical weather forecast segment?
Well, we've used our drone for weather forecasts before. We were out at I think it was Jonesboro Days about 2 years ago, and we went out there and we took the drone with us, and it was one of those summertime days where some showers and thunderstorms were popping up, a lot of more on the North Carolina mountains. And so it was interesting to be able to get the drone up, show the storms and what they look like from a couple miles away, and then be able to show it on the radar, because that's one of the reasons we have so many cameras across the region, because people react better when they can see stuff. And when you're able to show them what it looks like in real life compared to what it looks like on radar, because radar sometimes can just look like you took a bunch of buckets of paint and spilled it across the map there. Sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what you're looking at. But when you look at the clouds, you look at the storm from an aerial perspective, you're able to see a lot more. And as me as a meteorologist, I'm able to look at it from afar and kind of see what the storm is doing, if it's got a good structure, if it's tall, if it's a shorter storm, and that can tell me how strong it is, if it's weakening, and a lot of things that we need to then put into our forecast. We've used our drone too for severe weather events. We've used it for snow, not just to show the expanse of maybe like a snowstorm. We used it back in 2018 when we had the big snowstorm in December, shut the interstate down. We took the drone out there and flew over all the trucks and all the semi-trucks that were stuck out there on the interstate due to that big snow we had. When we've had some river flooding, we've used it for that to show how widespread the river flooding is, or just flooding from a thunderstorm in the afternoon. We've used it during severe weather to kind of show the damage after a storm. I've taken some shots of rainbows, I've taken some shots of shelf clouds. There's so many different avenues you can use it for in weather, and then in news in general too. We use it for breaking news. We use it for like when there's a warehouse fire. Basically anything you kind of can do with a typical news story and shoot with a regular camera, there's a pretty good chance you can take the drone out and get a different angle or a different view, especially if it's something like you're trying to show how big something is or how widespread something is impacting an area, it can be incredibly helpful.
It's ironic you mentioned that because I actually remember that snowstorm that impacted like all those trucks piling up and stuff. I completely remember that, watching that newscast. And I guess tell us too, how about like just the weather in general? How does it affect like trying to get some of those shots,
Yeah, and it's kind of nice that I have a weather background and I'm also in charge of our drone program, because most times they would probably come ask me anyway, hey, is it okay to go out today and fly this? And so there's a couple rules you got to think about before you go out and fly. Sinclair has a policy that we can't fly in precipitation. So no rain, no snow, no hail, anything like that we can't fly in. One, because of visibility, but two, just because electronics don't really like water and moisture too well. The other thing that we have to follow from the FAA is we have to have good visibility. We have to have what's known as VFR flight, or visual flight rules. So there's basically a certain criteria that has to be met in terms of visibility and ceiling height, which is the base or the distance between your object and the bottom of the clouds. You don't want to fly into clouds because there's no visibility. One, you would lose sight of the drone, but more importantly, other airplanes, other helicopters, people out there who are in the air, drones do pose a threat to them. They're basically like birds. So for many, many years, pilots worried about hitting birds. Now they worry a little bit about hitting drones. Now drones, most of the time, don't go up too high. There's a limit that's set by the FAA that says you can't go higher than 400 feet. That's the legal limit. Some people don't follow the legal limit. I've seen some videos of drones getting thousands of feet in the air, which is one, illegal, but two, also kind of dangerous, because to pilots, when you fly, it looks just like a little dot, and you don't really have time to react or move your airplane or move your helicopter out of the way before you hit it. And we'll take our drone, for example, excuse me, our Inspire 2. It weighs about 7 pounds, which is around the same weight as a Canadian goose. And if you've ever seen pictures of an airplane that's been hit by a goose or hit by a large bird, it will punch an entire hole in the frame of the aircraft. And so that's what we're trying to avoid with setting these weather minimums, setting these visibility minimums to protect not only us and our equipment, but also protect everyone else who is just going out flying.
Talk a little bit more about the severe weather aspect too, because with the crazy tornado that just hit around Nashville lately, I mean, it's just incredible to look at the damage. And I was looking at some footage that they had shot, really just a good aerial view of what's going on there. It was just incredible, the amount of damage. So how's that impact the role there at WCYB?
So there's many different entities that are using drones for exactly what you're talking about, severe weather surveys after the fact. The National Weather Service uses drones a lot now to go out and conduct these damage surveys. Because from the air, you can get a different perspective that you can't get on the ground. When you are on the ground in a tornado damage area, a lot of times it just kind of looks like there's a pile of debris in one spot. And you can't really tell, hey, this is laying this way, this is laying a different way. And that allows it to, using the drone allows us to get an aerial view and see, hey, this is pointing this direction, or there's a convergent path. With the tornado, all the debris typically points towards one central location, but you'll also have like one tree that's fallen this way, one tree that's fallen in a different direction, and that allows us to go out and say this was a tornado versus this was straight line winds. The Nashville tornado is a great example of that, because it also allows them to go out and see the damage from above, see how severe it is, get a width of the tornado, how wide the tornado was, and sometimes it can even help determine how long the tornado was. From the air sometimes, I give you an example of we had a tornado a couple years ago in Mountain City, Tennessee, and we took our drone out there, we launched it, and there was no damage per se in the area. It hit 2 homes in Mountain City, and then it went through a cornfield basically. Well, there was really no damage that you could see from the ground. When you got in the air, you could see the convergent pattern. All the corn was pushed over into one general location along one path, and it was able to allow the Weather Service and us to say, hey, that tornado actually went across this road into another field and continued on further than it probably would have been noted as otherwise, just by seeing an aerial view of it.
So you could literally, I imagine, then take the drone, I remember reading something about the distance, like that this supercell, this storm had traveled like across the state of Tennessee, and it was incredible, just like long amounts of distance and stuff. So I guess I would allow them to determine exactly, okay, this is tornado damage here versus this would be just, regular straight line storm damage.
Yeah, especially when you're out at one point. Now there's a couple other rules with drones that apply too. You can't fly out of your line of sight. So they can't fly along that entire 60-mile path. That's where helicopters and airplanes are always going to beat drones, at least with how the current regulations are set up, because you can't legally fly it out of your view. That's just another safety rule that's put in place by the FAA, unless you get a waiver. But by being able to go out and looking at a house too, and seeing maybe how well the roof was constructed or where the roof landed from an aerial view, that can help us determine the severity of a storm and how strong the tornado was. There's certain things we look for when a tornado hits. How well the house was constructed, basically what was destroyed, what type of building it was, and that allows us to then go back and use some engineering that's been put in place and research over the years to figure out how strong the winds were. Tornadoes are rated on the enhanced Vegeta scale, which goes from 0 to 5. The tornado you're mentioning, which impacted Davidson County, Tennessee, impacted the Nashville area, that one was on the ground for about 60 miles. That was an EF3. The Cookeville one, the Putnam County tornado, that was an EF4. And so both tornadoes, certainly incredibly strong tornadoes, and the pictures that you've seen from them have been quite incredible. So you mentioned, though, how we can use it for surveys and other people are using it for that, but even from just a news standpoint, once again, we are able to show those images and show the severity of it and be able to communicate once again in a different way using a drone platform that you sometimes can't get from the ground, because if you're on the ground, you're in a tornado area, it kind of just looks like there's debris all over the place, but from the air, you're able to show this house is destroyed, and 2 streets over, it may not be impacted at all, which is always crazy to look at with tornadoes, but that's how it goes. And that's an important thing to remember about tornadoes. They're small, they're isolated, they don't impact a huge area, and overall, your risk of being hit by one is incredibly low, but certainly where they do impact, they can cause some significant damage.
It reminds me, too, like of the tornado that hit several years back, I want to say 2011, back in Glade Spring, Virginia. I guess my other question is, how do the use of drones aid in the weather forecaster at WCYB? Does it actually help where you can actually forecast things out better than otherwise expected, or you can see a little bit more of a bird's eye view, I guess I'm saying?
Not so much for us, but there is some interesting research that's ongoing with some other companies and some other people who are using drones. If you think about it, a drone is basically like a mobile instrument. And so for weather, a lot of times the conditions that cause severe weather or the conditions that cause snow or ice or something like that occur in just the lowest 1,000 feet or the lowest 500 feet of the atmosphere. And the temperature can change and the moisture levels can change dramatically in that 500 to 1,000 foot range. And by using a drone, you could put instruments on it. And there's various drones out there that allow for you to put different things on it. Oftentimes you have to get some type of waiver. You have to get that instrument certified for use like that. But if you were to get a waiver from the FAA that says you can go over 400 feet, a lot of times this is done out in the plains where there's not a whole lot out there and there's big open fields and stuff like that versus like metropolitan areas where there's a lot of people and a lot of buildings. You could go out and get a lowest level, what we call sounding, of the temperature, the moisture levels, the wind, that can improve weather forecasts by going into these short-term models. I can see it being a very big thing in the future. The hurricane hunters, these are a little more complex drones, but NASA is using Global Hawks, which are kind of very sophisticated military drones, basically. They take off from runways and land just like a normal airplane would. But NASA is using Global Hawks, and they're flying them around hurricanes. They are going up, and they're actually above the hurricanes. And these are unmanned aircraft, and they're being able to gather different weather data. They're being able to gather pictures and stuff like that, then go back into our models. The hurricane hunters, which fly C-130 aircraft, they fly into the hurricanes. They take off from an airport, usually Biloxi, Mississippi, or near to the storm that's impacting, and they go out and they fly into the hurricane, through the eye of the hurricane, and they are the most crucial weather instrument that we have right now for gathering data. But it's just one plane. So let's say in theory you have one plane that can then go out and deploy 20 drones from that plane. Well, now instead of having just one, you've got multiple instruments moving around in a storm at one time. And they have come out with drones and these little unmanned aircraft that are cheap enough for one-time use. Oftentimes they'll launch them out of the back of the aircraft. They'll let them fly around for a little bit, and then, because the government's got a lot of money, they just let them go, and then we get some new ones. But that kind of stuff, I think, is where the future of weather forecasting is going to go, because we're going to be able to use so many more instruments and get so much more data that'll really help improve our models, which improves forecasts, which improves communication of severe weather to the everyday general public.
In your opinion, too, like as far as like other roles, policemen using them, like I said, I had mentioned, earlier, I know in the real estate industry as well. I mean, we use drones. I've used drones stuff in the past to, I guess just get a better idea. Tell us a little bit, maybe some different roles that you would see as far as drone usage, other fields.
I think the possibilities are endless, and I think a lot of them we haven't thought of yet. For the police stuff and things like that, we even here in our local area, some stories we've been involved on from a news standpoint. There was a child that went missing near the Walmart and Volunteer Parkway. I believe it was about 2 years ago now, and they used drones to help find the child. You can put different type of lenses on drones. You can have heat signature lenses on there. You can have infrared lenses, night vision lenses. Most of our police departments in the area do use drones now for search and rescue, but they also use them for crash scene reconstruction. So you have a car crash has happened, maybe it's a crash with injuries or a crash with a fatality. They'll go out and they'll launch the drone, once again for an aerial view, to kind of figure out what happened. Are there tire tracks in this area? Did the car go across the median? What happened to get the end result, which was a crash? When Dale Earnhardt Jr. was involved in that plane crash at Elizabethton Airport, we used our drone for gathering news images, but the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board has used drones before for crash scene reconstruction to kind of figure out what happened, to see the structure of an object. We were actually asked a while back by the emergency manager in the fire department down in Greene County to bring our drone out and use it for a survey of a building to figure out the structural integrity of the building. There was a fire that happened in a warehouse. They were interested in seeing what the roof looked like from above before they put firefighters on the roof for their safety. And so before, you would have to put a ladder truck up, or you'd have to put someone up on the roof and potentially risk them. Well, now you can just launch a drone, get your images, look at them, analyze them after, and you're good to go. Engineering surveys use them a lot. You mentioned kind of earlier how package delivery and Amazon is trying really hard to get delivery by drones, and even Domino's and some of these pizza companies have, I think, joked about it, but I wouldn't shock me if we do that in the future. And medical stuff too. Once again, and back in the day, you used to have to put different lab results or even like organs and stuff, or transplant victims and stuff like that. You used to have to put them on an airplane and fly them. Well, they are using drones in some areas to transport those items. In Alaska, I remember hearing a story about how they're using drones to transport medicine to areas that you have to fly an airplane into because they don't have transportation routes. They are only accessible by plane, and a lot of times in the winter they're not accessible as much up there because of the harsh weather conditions, and so it's unsafe for a pilot to fly. But if you get a waiver, you could fly an unmanned drone. You're not risking anyone's life, and you're still delivering the goods that you need to get delivered.
How about the quality of the images and stuff too? I mean, with the technology we have out now, it's just, it's incredible. You go to like a Best Buy, you see like the new TVs and stuff. Well, now you look at drones and you look at the quality and stuff. Tell us a little bit about that.
So one of the first drones I had was some $60 drone that I just bought online. And the camera was horrible. It didn't have GPS. It eventually flew away, crashed into a tree, and I have no idea where it is to this day. So now there are much better, more expensive drones too, but even the cost of drones with good cameras have come down. Kind of similar to cell phones, kind of similar to just regular cameras in general, the cost is really diminished. And so you're right, our drones now can shoot 4K video, and most consumer model drones shoot 4K video. There are more expensive drones that are being used by the movie industry to even shoot bigger IMAX quality images, which is just crazy to think about. But being able to shoot stuff like that nowadays, you can go to most stores and buy one for $500 and you get a 4K quality drone, or for that low cost is kind of crazy.
So you've mentioned some of those roles. I guess let's go back towards the news. Working at the TV station there, WCYB and whatnot. As far as like roles in the news, you mentioned earlier with the police. Like with the search for that small child and stuff that happened. I mean, how about the roles? Yeah, just in particular in the news business.
So one of the things we try to do is our reporters, each morning we have a morning editorial meeting. So they come in, they pitch their stories, and they say, hey, there's this new, I'm just going to give you a random example, there's this new building in Johnson City is being built, and it's going to open on Tuesday. Well, that's good. It's a cool story. But how big's the building? Is it huge? Is it something that you can see from a drone's perspective that would maybe give you a vast idea? Or maybe there's a huge construction project ongoing. The Falls development, the Pinnacle development, the Meadowview area. All of those projects have been great things to shoot with our drone because it's able to show how vast the project is and how big it is. We kind of talked about severe weather and flooding and stuff like that a little earlier, but we've even used our drone for just different angles of shots, different styles of shots. If we have maybe a story ongoing where the reporter, him or her, is out on the lake or out on a boat on the lake, you could take our drone, you could fly it next to the boat, and you could get a moving shot that would require otherwise a second boat or someone who really knows how to swim very well. But otherwise, you wouldn't be able to get the shot that you would otherwise.
As far as like aerial views, just in the beauty of the Appalachian region, I mean, my goodness, I've seen some great footage there, like at the end of like certain clips, certain blocks of the show, for instance. Sometimes it really can kind of display just the beauty of this area.
Yeah, so if you watch our newscast, at the end of our 5, 5:30, and 6 on weekdays, we do kind of what you're saying. We call them beauty shots or bump shots. They usually play going in and out of one of our commercial breaks. And so we've gone out and we've gathered video of a lot of landmarks, a lot of common places around here that people know, ETSU. I'd like to fly the Northeast State campus, but unfortunately it's right next to the Tri-Cities Airport, which is a big no-no. You can't fly within a certain radius of the airport, once again going back to the safety thing, because of the limitations that are put on drones to protect airplanes in general. So that's been one I haven't been able to get around yet, but we'll see if one day maybe we can get some nice video of Northeast State. But we've shot video of the mountains, we've shot video of the lakes, we've shot video of just things that people see every single day, but maybe they've never seen them from that perspective. A lot of people in our area, including my fiance, have never flown before. And so she's never seen our area from above. But now with a drone, you're kind of able to see our region from a different perspective that you wouldn't be able to have otherwise.
Yeah, so like, people like me that's not completely terrified of flights, but like, okay, I would still like to see the region from a little better view without actually maybe getting in the plane. Well, this is kind of a...
And you think about it too, now virtual reality is becoming such a big thing. Oculus headsets, these headsets people can put on and be immersed in it. You could, I'm kind of just thinking here, you could take a drone, you could get some images, and you could fly a big enough area, and now basically you have a 360-degree view that you're able to get as if you were the drone out flying. And even with drones, as you fly them, these FPV headsets have become a pretty popular thing. So instead of looking at the drone, looking up at it, you put on these goggles, and you see through your eyes what the drone is seeing in real time. So it's almost like you are the drone flying through the air. And drone racing leagues have become a big thing. There are even a couple around here where people go out and they set up a little course and they put on these FPV goggles and they fly the drone through an obstacle course and compete. It's been on ESPN. It's been on some other television shows. It's becoming a bigger and bigger thing, very similar to how gaming became a bigger thing several years ago. I see the industry for drones and drone sports and things like that becoming a bigger avenue. For sports, we've used our drone a couple of times to do Friday Night Football. That's a huge thing we actually do. I can't believe I forgot about that. We do Friday Night Football broadcasts at WCYB, where we show local football teams across the area. And in doing that, we've used our drone for beauty shots. I've used it to show plays from above. It's been very helpful for that. We used it for the NASCAR races at BMS, and Fox Sports is trying out drones more and more for their broadcasts as well. During the Daytona 500, they had a drone out there, and they were using it to get different views that you couldn't get otherwise. They still use the helicopters and the blimps and stuff like that, but I think if the batteries ever become better, and we improve them to where they're able to stay up more than maybe just say 20, 25 minutes, which is kind of the baseline now for most drones, at least most consumer drones, we could have a significant change in how video is shot, which from a money standpoint, drones are a lot cheaper to operate than helicopters are. And so it could be a big cost saving for a lot of these companies.
Yeah. Just lastly, to kind of touch on that, you mentioned the races and stuff. I was thinking about Bristol Motor Speedway, like, getting maybe an aerial type shot with a drone, like of that kind of event.
And you can. Once again, there are rules and regulations that apply to it. The FAA, for protecting people, sets up a TFR, which is known as a temporary flight restriction, which means you cannot fly a drone over BMS or anywhere over the area 1 hour before, 1 hour after the flight time. Also, it's just really not a good idea. There's other privacy laws that come into play. There's other laws for the number one rule from the FAA is don't fly over people. Well, flying directly over the track, that's a big mass of people. And so that's the number one thing that you want to avoid there in most instances. But yes, you're right. Things like that have become bigger and bigger for promotional standpoints, for getting different images, and I see it getting more and more important in the future.
All right, we have a few seconds. Google. I had to just at least mention Google because some of the images that Google has shot has been incredible.
Yeah. Google has their Street View stuff and their Earth stuff. I could see them taking drones and maybe integrating those images into those different platforms in the future.
That's incredible. Well, I'll be looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with all the technology and stuff in the future. It's going to be pretty amazing, and even now, even now it's amazing. Thank you. Well, we'll be back in just a moment to wrap up Direction Northeast.
Opportunity is waiting just around the corner. If you look close enough and stay focused, you can see the transformation. It's groundbreaking, and it's just the beginning. It's your future, and it begins at Northeast State. Wherever you're going, Northeast State Community College, we're here to get you there.
I've learned a lot of things in my life, but there is no substitute for hard work. If you've got the will and determination, doors will always continue to open. Life puts us in the driver's seat. Where we go and what we accomplish is up to us. What's that old saying? When the going gets tough, the tough get going.
That concludes the program for today. We spoke with Ricky Mathews about drones and how they can change the way we live. Community is very important to the students at Northeast State Community College, and this program takes a look at a few of the subjects they find important. Until we meet again next time, on behalf of the students, staff, and faculty of Northeast State Community College, I'm Kid Alexander, and this is Direction Northeast.